Welcome to the deep dive. We love unpacking these fascinating topics, and today, it's all about somatic psychotherapy. We're going to be exploring a therapist's guide. It's jam-packed with like over 120 techniques, a treasure chest of tools
Right.
for healing and transformation.
It is. It is really intriguing how this guide dives into the connection between our bodies and minds,
Mm.
showing how we can use that connection for growth and change.
Right. So our mission today is to understand this mind-body integration, to see how somatic psychotherapy actually works. And trust me, there are some seriously cool concepts in here. We're talking about literally shaking off stress to restore balance, facing our inner shame monsters to take away their power, and even tapping into the power of the vagus nerve to calm our stress response.
So, yeah. And what's fascinating is how often we go through life,
Yeah.
disconnected from our bodies, rarely pausing to listen to the wisdom they hold.
Right. We're all about thinking and doing. But how often do we actually tune into what our bodies are telling us? So let's break this down. First things first. What exactly is the soma?
Well, the guide actually defines it right at the beginning. It says the Greek word soma means the body, psyche means mind. Therefore, somatic psychotherapy is the study of the body-mind interface. So basically, it's about recognizing that our bodies and minds are constantly talking to each other, influencing each other in ways we might not even realize.
Okay, so it's not just about our thoughts and feelings. It's about how those are reflected in our physical sensations and how those sensations in turn impact our mental and emotional states.
Exactly. And two key concepts the source material highlights are interoception and proprioception. Interoception is your ability to feel what's going on inside your body right now, like your heartbeat, your gut feelings, the temperature of your skin. It's like an internal radar system for your physical state.
And proprioception is kind of like your body's GPS, right? It's about knowing where your body is in space, how it's moving, and how the different parts relate to each other.
Precisely. And the guide stresses that. Our modern lifestyle, with all its screens and distractions, often leads us to become disembodied. We spend so much time in our heads that we lose touch with the wisdom our bodies hold.
So it's like we're living in a world of disembodied heads, disconnected from the physical reality of our being. No wonder we're so stressed out.
Yeah, that disconnect is a major factor.
Hey.
The guide also dives into this idea of the body as a source of information. It argues that our bodies actually store memories of our past experiences, not just in our minds, but also in our muscles, tissues, and nervous systems.
This idea of the body remembering is really intriguing. So past trauma, for example, can leave a lasting imprint on our physicality, even if we've mentally moved on.
That's right. The guide even mentions that physical tension, chronic pain, or even digestive issues can sometimes be linked back to unresolved emotional experiences. Like our bodies are trying to tell us something to bring those hidden experiences to light so we can heal.
This makes me think about those times. I get a knot in my stomach when I'm nervous, or feel my shoulders tighten up when I'm stressed. It's like my body's reacting to the situation before I even have time to process it mentally.
That's a perfect example of how the body speaks its own language. And this is where somatic psychotherapy comes in. It provides tools to decode those bodily messages and use them for healing.
Okay, so it's not just about talking through our problems. It's about tuning into those physical sensations and understanding what they're trying to tell us. And that brings us to another key concept, embodied mindfulness.
And it's important to clarify that this isn't just the typical mindfulness of focusing on your breath. Embodied mindfulness takes it a step further. It's about bringing awareness to your entire physical experience, your posture, your movements, the sensations in your muscles and organs.
So it's about being fully present in our bodies, noticing what's happening without judgment. It makes me think about how often I rush through my day, totally disconnected from my physical experience.
That's the trap many of us fall into. The guide highlights how vital embodied mindfulness is, especially for therapists who work with trauma. Imagine sitting with a client who's recounting a deeply painful experience. If the therapist isn't grounded in their own body, they can easily get overwhelmed by the emotional intensity of the session.
That makes sense. It's like they need to be a steady anchor for the client. And that steadiness comes from being fully present in their own physical experience. But the guide also mentions some potential downsides of mindfulness.
Right. It's important to acknowledge that mindfulness isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. For some people, especially those who've experienced trauma, mindfulness can actually be triggering. It might bring up difficult emotions or memories that they're not ready to face.
So it's not about forcing mindfulness on everyone. It's about using it with awareness and sensitivity to the individual's needs and experiences. Speaking of techniques, the guide introduces a bunch that sound really interesting. Can we dive into those now?
Absolutely. The guide actually offers a whole toolbox of techniques, over 120 to be exact. But let's focus on a few key ones that really highlight the principles of somatic psychotherapy. For instance, there's a set of grounding techniques that can be incredibly helpful for managing anxiety, feeling more present, and even enhancing focus.
That's something I think we could all use a little more of these days.
Hmm.
So tell me more about these grounding techniques. What are they all about, and how do they work?
Grounding techniques are all about bringing your attention to the present moment, specifically to your physical sensations and your connection to the earth. They can be incredibly helpful for managing anxiety overwhelm, or even just feeling more present in your day-to-day life.
So it's like creating an anchor that keeps us from getting swept away by our thoughts and emotions.
Exactly. One of the grounding techniques the guide highlights is back body awareness. This one is especially useful for therapists who are about to go into challenging sessions.
I remember reading about that one. It's about using the sensations in your back to create a sense of stability and presence, right?
That's right. By consciously feeling your back against the chair, you can shift your focus away from the mental chatter and create a sense of grounding. It's like having a secret weapon to stay centered, even when things get emotionally intense.
This makes me think about the times I felt my back tense up during a difficult conversation. It's like my body was trying to protect itself, to brace for impact.
That's a great observation. Our bodies are always communicating with us, often in subtle ways. And that's why techniques like back body awareness are so powerful. They help us become more attuned to those subtle signals and to use them to our advantage.
So it's not just about being aware of our back, it's about using that awareness to regulate our nervous systems and stay grounded in challenging situations. Are there any other grounding techniques in the guide?
Absolutely. The guide also mentions grounding through the body, which is a great technique for anyone to use, not just therapists. It involves simple steps like feeling your feet on the floor, noticing the weight of your body in the chair, and slowing down your breath.
Those sound so simple, yet I can already feel a sense of calm just thinking about them.
It's amazing how powerful those simple actions can be.
Mm.
And the guide emphasizes that you can do these grounding techniques anytime, anywhere, while you're sitting at your desk waiting in line,
Mm.
or even lying in bed.
So it's like having a portable toolkit for managing stress and anxiety. We can literally ground ourselves wherever we are.
Precisely. And speaking of feeling grounded, the guide also introduces this concept of self-resourcing through floor work.
That sounds interesting. What's floor work all about?
It's about using gentle fluid movements on the floor to release tension and rejuvenate yourself. The guide describes it as a way to reconnect with the Earth's energy and to tap into our own inner resources.
So it's like a mini yoga session for self-care.
Exactly. And the guide emphasizes the importance of syncing your breath with the movements and allowing your body to move intuitively.
It's fascinating how all these techniques interweave mindfulness, movement, and even our connection to nature.
It's about recognizing that we're not just isolated minds, we're embodied beings who are deeply connected to our environment.
This is making me rethink how I approach self-care. It's not just about bubble baths and face masks. It's about nurturing that mind-body connection.
Absolutely. And speaking of self-care, the guide also talks about the container principle, which is an interesting metaphor for building resilience.
Okay, I remember that one being mentioned earlier, but I'm still not quite clear on what the container represents. Can you explain that a bit more?
Sure. Imagine a container like a jar or a vase. The size of that container represents your capacity to hold difficult experiences, like stress, trauma, or even just the everyday challenges of life.
So the bigger the container, the more we can handle without getting overwhelmed.
Exactly. And the guide emphasizes that. We can actually build the size of our container over time by developing practices that nourish us, both physically and emotionally.
So it's like we're strengthening our inner resilience muscle.
Precisely. And the stronger our resilience, the better equipped we are to navigate the ups and downs of life without falling apart.
This is making me think about how important it is to have those go-to practices that help us to recharge and replenish our energy, whether it's spending time in nature, listening to music, or simply taking a few moments to breathe deeply. It's about finding what works for us and making it a regular part of our lives.
That's such a key point. The guide stresses that building resilience isn't about toughening up or ignoring our feelings. It's about creating a foundation of support that allows us to face challenges with more strength and grace.
And it seems like these somatic techniques are a big part of building that foundation. They give us concrete tools to manage stress, regulate our emotions, and feel more connected to our body.
Exactly. And this leads us to another important area that the guide explores, working with shame.
That's a topic that I think resonates with a lot of people. Shame can be such a heavy and isolating emotion.
It really can. The guide describes shame as an involuntary body response, something we often try to hide or suppress. But that actually manifests in very physical ways.
So instead of just being a thought or a feeling, shame actually shows up in our bodies. How does that work?
Think about how you feel when you're embarrassed or ashamed. You might blush onto your shoulders, avoid eye contact, or even feel a tightness in your chest. Those are all physical manifestations of shame.
It's like our bodies are betraying us, revealing those feelings we're trying so hard to hide.
In a way, yes. But the guide emphasizes that these bodily responses are not something to be ashamed of. They're simply signals that something needs our attention.
So instead of judging ourselves for feeling shame, we can use those physical sensations as a cue to explore what's going on beneath the surface.
Exactly. And the guide offers a really interesting technique for doing just that. It's called outing the shame monster.
That sounds a little scary, but also kind of fun. What's the shame monster all about?
It's a metaphor for that feeling of shame that can feel so big and overwhelming. The guide suggests giving that shame a voice and a form, almost like a character in a story, so that we can start to understand it and take away its power.
So instead of letting shame control us, we're turning it into something we can observe and interact with, almost like we're taking the mystery out of it.
Precisely. And the guide offers specific steps for outing the shame monster, involving things like journaling, visualization, and even drawing your shame monster.
That sounds like a really creative way to approach something that can feel so heavy and painful. It's like we're using our imaginations to diffuse the power of shame.
And the guide also mentions another technique that focuses on a specific muscle that's often affected by stress and trauma. It's called releasing the psoas muscle.
Okay, now we're getting into anatomy, remind me. Where is the psoas muscle and why is it so important?
The psoas muscle is a deep core muscle that connects your spine to your legs. It plays a key role in posture movement. And this is the interesting part. It's also closely linked to our fight or flight response.
So when we're stressed or anxious, our psoas muscles tense up.
Exactly. And if that tension becomes chronic, it can lead to all sorts of problems, from back pain to digestive issues to difficulty sleeping.
Wow. It's amazing how one muscle can have such a wide-ranging impact on our well-being.
It really is. And that's why techniques like releasing the psoas muscle are so important. They help us to release that deep-seated tension and restore balance to our bodies.
I'm starting to see how all these seemingly disparate techniques are actually interconnected. They're all about tapping into that mind-body connection and using it to heal and grow.
That's a great observation, and the guide emphasizes that. This is not just about learning a bunch of techniques. It's about cultivating a deeper awareness of our bodies and how they hold our experiences. It's about recognizing that our bodies are not separate from our minds. They're an integral part of who we are.
And that awareness seems to be the foundation for all these techniques. It's about tuning into those subtle signals our bodies are sending us and learning to listen with curiosity and compassion.
Precisely. And that's a skill that can benefit us in every area of our lives, not just in therapy.
Speaking of benefits, the guide mentions some fascinating insights about how therapists can use embodied mindfulness to avoid burnout and be more present for their clients. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, it's easy to think of therapists as these all-knowing, emotionally invincible beings. But the reality is they're just as human as anyone else.
Exactly. And the guide actually dedicates a whole section to the therapist's own somatic experience, emphasizing how important self-awareness is for avoiding burnout.
It's called Somatic Inventory of Burnout Signs. And it's fascinating because it doesn't just talk about feeling tired or stressed. It actually lists physical symptoms like headaches, digestive problems, difficulty sleeping, even emotional numbness as signs of burnout.
Wow, so it really highlights how deeply interconnected our minds and bodies are. It's like our bodies are sounding the alarm bells, trying to get our attention long before we might consciously realize we're burning out.
Exactly. And the guide goes beyond just listing the symptoms. It also offers practical advice for addressing burnout, like prioritizing self-care, setting boundaries with clients, and even seeking support from colleagues.
I love that it's not just about pushing through and ignoring the signs. It's about recognizing the importance of the therapist's own well-being.
Absolutely. As the saying goes, you can't pour from an empty cup. Therapists need to be able to refill their own cups so they can be fully present and supportive for their clients.
This all makes me think about how we can apply these principles of somatic psychotherapy to our own lives, even if we're not therapists. What are some key takeaways that listeners can start integrating into their daily routines?
One of the biggest takeaways for me is the importance of simply tuning into our bodies, paying attention to the subtle signals. They're sending us all the time. How often do we go through our days on autopilot, completely ignoring our physical experience until something starts hurting or we get sick?
Yeah, it's like we treat our bodies like machines, expecting them to just keep functioning without any maintenance or care.
Right. And the guide is really encouraging us to shift that perspective, to start listening to our bodies as sources of wisdom, to pay attention to the sensations, the emotions, the energy that's flowing through us.
What signals is your body sending you right now? Take a moment to just check in with yourself. What do you notice?
That's such a powerful question to ask ourselves throughout the day. And then based on what we notice, we can start to make choices that support our well-being. If we're feeling tense, maybe we take a few deep breaths or do a quick stretch. If we're feeling drained, maybe we step away from our screens and spend some time in nature.
It's about becoming more responsive to our body's needs, rather than just pushing through and ignoring them.
Precisely. And the more we practice this,
Yeah.
the more fluent we become in the language of our bodies. We start to recognize the early warning signs of stress and burnout, and we can take steps to prevent them from escalating.
It's like we're developing a deeper level of self-awareness and self-care. One breath, one movement, one sensation at a time.
Exactly. And the guide leaves us with this really thought-provoking question. Many people who don't know a lot about trauma think that trauma has something to do with something that happened to you a long time ago. In fact, the past is the past. And the only thing that matters is what happens right now. And what is trauma is the residue that a past event leaves in your own sensory experiences in your body. And it's not that event out there that becomes intolerable, but the physical sensations with which you live that become intolerable. And you will do anything to make them go away.
Wow, that's a powerful statement. It's a reminder that the past is always present in our bodies, and that healing trauma is not just about changing our thoughts or beliefs. It's about addressing those deep-seated physical and emotional patterns that keep us stuck.
And it's about recognizing that we have the power to change those patterns, to create new ways of being in our bodies that
Yeah.
feel more safe, more grounded, and more whole.
This has been such an insightful deep dive into the world of somatic psychotherapy. I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of the mind-body connection and the incredible potential for healing that exists within us.
It's been a pleasure exploring this guide with you. Hopefully it sparked a curiosity in our listeners to learn more about this fascinating approach to healing and transformation.
Absolutely. And remember, you don't have to be a therapist to benefit from these techniques. The wisdom of somatic psychotherapy is available to all of us if we're willing to listen to our bodies and honor the incredible connection between our physical and emotional experiences.
Thank you for joining us on the deep dive. We'll be back soon with another fascinating exploration of the ideas that are shaping our world.